As the brutal war between Israel and Hamas rages on in Palestine, and protests and counter-protests are spreading throughout the world, what are the chances of F1 being drawn into the conflict? There are those who would argue that the chances are very high, given that sporting venues have long been soft targets for protesters. F1, as the only annual global sport in the world, with a worldwide television coverage at each race, is and has always been a particular target for protesters. F1 has been targeted for on-track protests in the UK, Belgium, and Germany, for example. F1 and its drivers are also frequently called upon to make statements or take positions on a wide range of issues. There was the big hoo-ha over taking the knee, but it ended up happening. There was equal deliberation over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which ultimately resulted in the exclusion of Russian teams, drivers, and Grand Prix. Liberty media have long proclaimed their goal to use F1 as a means of promoting Western norms and ideologies in the Middle East. So, the chances of people wanting to use an F1 event as a protest backdrop or tool are very high, especially with a globally emotive conflict that is sparking protests and counter-protests globally. In the case of the Israel-Hamas war, the geopolitics adds an extra dimension to the possible impact on F1. There are 4 Middle Eastern destinations this season, and the same 4 are on the 2024 calendar. 3 of this season's Middle Eastern races have been held, and the season finale is scheduled for Abu Dhabi in just under 2 months, even though the title has already been decided rather predictably. The geopolitics in the region and the relationships the F1 hosts have with Hamas, Palestine, Israel, and the West will undoubtedly affect the races, whether it be around the security or the appropriateness. Only 2 of the countries have full diplomatic relationships with Israel. Saudi Arabia's efforts to normalize relationship with Israel have been derailed by the war. Qatar is already reportedly acting as mediator between Israel and Hamas. So, they all have no choice but to react in one way or the other. Their respective responses will undoubtedly be viewed from their socio-political lens, and F1 could possibly become collateral damage, depending on how things go. Just over a decade ago, F1's noble attempt to hold a showcase event in Jerusalem to promote peace between Israel and Palestine was met with mixed receptions. These would be one of those times when it would have been helpful to have a highly respected champion whose outlook extended beyond the insular world of F1. What are the chances of an outspoken, ill-natured driver like Max Verstappen making an unguarded statement that will cause a global uproar? These are the unintended consequences of race manipulation that Liberty Media could not have foreseen when they started gimmicking up F1. Of course, F1 can simply disclaim any individual's views, but guilt by association is particularly hard to dispel when everyone knows the backstory. Manipulating results in a national sport is very different to doing so in a global sport. Your national champion can get away with being as offensive as he likes to his domestic audience, but it is a very different matter to be offensive on a global platform. If you don't know, ask the UFC about Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Liberty Media can use John Malone's extensive influence to muzzle the mainstream media to their heart's content, but social media is their kryptonite. Max Verstappen, his dad, and many of those in their orbit pride themselves on being routinely offensive, under the guise of not succumbing to the political correctness brigade. What are the chances that Max will speak out of turn on the Israel-Hamas war to the detriment of F1? We mourn the loss of lives, pray for the safe return of the abducted and a speedy resolution to the conflict.